Hi guys, we are working on our rates today and doing some prices of mangoes and pears. So I know I told you we'd work on speed and we will get to that, but right now we're just doing the table here, excuse me, that shows type of fruit, amount purchased, amount paid, and then they want us to figure out the cost per unit. So the mangoes are 2 pounds, and they just put a decimal and 00 in there because later on they're going to use some decimals. But right now it's just 2 pounds, so you can ignore the decimal and the two zeros on this one. And then the amount paid is $2.60 for 2 pounds. So how many? We're trying to look for the unit rate, which means we break it down to 1 unit. So let's figure out how much for 1 pound. So in order to do that, since we have 2 pounds, we can look right down here and it says the cost of mangoes per pound equals the cost of mangoes divided by the weight of the mangoes. So we took the cost, $2.60, which was right up here. We divided by 2 pounds. They just don't have the decimal point and the two zeros here, but it's 2 pounds. And if we divide that, it will equal $1.30. So that would be the cost for 1 pound, or cost per pound, of mangoes. So that would be the unit rate, since it breaks it down to 1 pound, 1 unit rate. So the unit cost of the mangoes is $1.30 per pound. Now pears, cost of pears per pound equals the cost of pears divided by the weight of the pears. So this one, it actually has a decimal point, and it's 2.50 pounds, or 2.5 pounds is what that is. And it costs $3.50. So just like they said down here, we are going to go ahead and take the cost of pears per pound. Cost of pears divided by the weight of pears is how we would figure the cost per pound. So we're going to take the cost of the pears, $3.50 is the amount paid, divided by 2.5 pounds. And so if you do that on your calculator, or you can do it in your head, or you can do it on your paper, whichever works best for you, it would go $1.40 for 1 pound per pound of pears. The unit cost for 1 unit is $1.40 per pound. Now we're going to do cost of oranges. I'll scoop my book up here a little bit. Cost of oranges. Cost of oranges per pound, if we look on our table up here, oranges per pound is $2 for 2.25 pounds, or 2.25 pounds, it's $2.70. So if we're going to find the cost per pound, we need to go down here, and just like we did on the other ones, we take the cost of the oranges, which is $2.70, and we divide it by the weight of the oranges, because we're trying to find how much it is for 1 unit. So if we go ahead and divide that, it will give us $1.20. So if you can see, the pattern here is what we're doing is every single one we're taking the cost and we're dividing it by the amount in each one of these, and it gives us the amount that we need to do for 1 unit, and it gives us per pound what the cost is for 1 pound. And so each of these is the cost for 1 pound instead of 2 or 2.5 or 2.25 pounds. So comparing the units of the 3 types of fruit, the unit cost of the pears is the greatest, which is the question they asked us: which fruit costs the most per pound? Unit cost of the oranges was $1.20 for 1 pound, cost of mangoes $1.30 for 1 pound, and the cost of pears $1.40 for 1 pound. So the pears cost the most per pound. So let's move on to our next page here. I'll move my book over, and we are going to look at this new table. It's talking about vegetables. We were fruits before, now we're vegetables. And it is saying the table shows the cost of some food items Billy bought from a supermarket. And I would like you to go ahead and pause the video and do number 8 on your own. And it even helps you by breaking down and saying, okay, if this is the cost of potatoes, the weight of potatoes, and if you follow your page that we just did a minute ago, it should be able to help you figure out how to divide that. So if you could go through and walk through number 8 on your own, that would be great. And then you can go ahead and start the video again. Okay, we're back, and we will go over the answer to number 8 tomorrow, but hopefully walking it through like they did for you helped you to figure it out on your own. So now we are on to speed. Find the speed or rate of a travel of a moving object. So before we were just doing prices of our produce, now we're doing speed. And remember, on our vocabulary words that were a couple pages back, it had unit rate right here. It had our vocabulary words, rate and unit rate we did on the same day, and it also has speed. And so remember this yellow box around it, and so we look for that same yellow kind of box around our vocabulary words, and look, there it is. So speed, write down speed on your notes. So you should have problem 8 done on your notes showing your work, and now write speed, and the definition is speed is a rate that compares distance traveled, so however far you've traveled, to the time that it's taken to travel that distance. So if I decided I'm going to drive to Vantage and go jump in the lake, I need to say, okay, the distance I travel, let's say it's 40 miles to Vantage. I don't know that it is, I'm just saying that. If it's 40 miles, how long would it take me to drive there? And that is the speed. It is defined as the distance traveled per unit time. So unit time would 1 hour. Over here it says the speed is the distance and the time divided. So the time, if we're doing per unit time, it would be 1 hour, because 1 unit is 1 hour for time. Or if we're talking minutes, it would be 1 minute or 1 second, and the distance you traveled in that 1 second, 1 minute, or 1 hour. So let's look at our example. Here's town A, here's town B. Daryl rode from town A to town B in 1 hour. He rode 40 miles. So that would be 40 miles per hour, which is how our cars tell our speed right now. Gavin also drove in the same direction, so I'm assuming this is Gavin. In 1 hour, he drove 50 miles, so he drove 50 miles per hour. Daryl rode at a speed of 40 miles per hour, and Gavin rode at a speed of 50 miles per hour. So let's look at this problem, and they're going to help us break it down into a bar graph right down here. And so our bar graph is going to, not necessarily a graph, but our bar units. And so, get my book situated here. A car traveled a distance of 120 miles in 2 hours. So this isn't per hour because it's not talking about 1 hour, it's talking about 2 hours. So it is not at a unit rate right now. Find the speed of the car. So essentially what we're doing is we're just taking the 2 hours, and in 2 hours it traveled 120 miles. So how could we figure out how much it traveled in 1 hour? Well, we would just divide it, because this is 2. We would divide it by 2 because then it would only be 1 hour. So just like if I had 6 cookies and I said, hey, I'm going to split that and only eat 3 this hour and 3 the next hour, I would divide those into 2 parts, which would give me how many I'm going to eat an hour. 3 cookies in an hour. So here they're asking you how much would it be in 1 hour. So we just take 120 and divide it by 2 like they've done here. 2 hours, 120 miles, 1 hour. So we take, just like our way up here at the top, it says how we find the speed of something, and it says it right here. We put the distance on top and the time on the bottom, and we will get the speed. So just like that, right down here, they did the same thing. Distance at the top, time on the bottom. So the distance was 120 miles. We divided it by the time, 2 hours, and it equaled 60 miles. So the speed of the car was 60 miles per hour, or in 1 hour. if that makes sense. You can also draw it like this, where it says, here's the information I have, 120 miles and 2 hours, and you can just say, okay, now I need to line up my two measurements that are talking about the same measurements. So this is miles. So the one thing I do know is 60 miles, and then I pair that up with how many hours, and that would have been our question, or no, our question mark would have been the 60 miles. So I would have paired up our 1 hour and 2 hour. They're asking me for 1 hour. I have 2 hours, and then this would have been our blank that we would have said, okay, what did they do to find 1 when we had 2? Well, they divided it by 2. So the top I divide by 2, and that gives me 60. Hopefully that makes sense to you. So the speed of the car was 60. So I would like you guys to do on page 165, I would like you guys to walk through. It gives you one more example here. Joyce is climbing up a steep trail and she climbs 3/4 of a mile in 1/2 hour. So what we can do right now is look at this and say, what's my distance? What's my time? The distance is 3/4 of a mile. What's my time? 1/2 hour. Find her climbing speed in miles per hour. So what we're going to do is, it's asking us to find speed. In order to find speed, we put our distance on the top, our time on the bottom. And so if we remember our fractions multiplying and dividing, we put our, right here, our distance is a mile, comes first, because if we write it like this, but then we decide, I don't want to write it on top of each other here, I'm just going to write it straight across. Our distance comes first, then we divide it by our time, just like they wrote right here, distance comes first, then time. Right here it says if we have distance on top and time here to figure out the speed, it's the same as distance first, then time next. So make sure you remember that. And so we'll go 3/4 divided by 2. If you remember our song, whenever we divide, we just look to the right, do the reciprocal, and multiply across. So here if we did the reciprocal of 1/2, if we flip it around, it is just 2 over 1. And anything over 1 just means, hey, I have 2 pieces of pie and they're both in one piece. So that would just be how many pies? All whole pieces, 2. So anytime you have a fraction that is over 1, it is just that number. So you can see they did that right here. They said 3/4 times 2, and so we just multiply across. 3 times 2, just like we would on our paper here. If I kept this fraction, I would have 3/4 over 2 over 1, and I multiply across, which would equal 6, and 4, and we'd have to reduce, or you could have cross-canceled. 2 goes into 2 one time, 4 2 times, and then it would be, whoops, our answer wouldn't have been this. It would have been already reduced to 3 times 1 and 2 times 1, 3 over 2. And since they want that in a mixed fraction, we always take our improper fraction. 2 goes into 3 one time with a remainder of 1, and our denominator stays the same. So hopefully that makes sense to you. If you guys could please do number 9, so you should have number 8 already done from page 163. And then you should also have your speed vocabulary word written down. And number 9, I would like you guys to do on guided practice, and number 10 on page 165 right here. You might not be able to see that, but that's what it is. So if you could do page 9 and 10, and then we will go over the rest tomorrow. Hopefully you guys found the animal that's on here, and I am going to write, have a great day. Just because if I said it, it wouldn't be as good as writing it. Have a great day. We'll see you tomorrow.